World of Warcraft, The Story of the Lich King, Part 2. Arthas Menethil, Crown Prince of Lordaeron and son of King Terenas Menethil II, was destined to one day become the king of the magnificent kingdom of Lordaeron. He was born in a time ravaged by war, and so because of this, Arthas was trained in combat by Muradin Bronzebeard and later was inducted into the Knights of the Silver Hand at the very young age of 19. Even though he was seen by his mentors as sometimes headstrong and rash, he was more widely renowned as being a skilled and honorable warrior. As the years passed, Arthas eventually met Jaina Proudmoore, who were both quite fond of each other, but could never actually pursue their relationship because of their commitments to their duties. In time, however, both of them would agree to rekindle the relationship, but they would do this at the time of the beginning of the Scourge invasion, that would change both of their lives as they have known it. As the news of an unknown plague spread throughout the lands, Captain Falric and Jaina were both sent to join Arthas in investigating this blight. Eventually, their searches led them in confronting a necromancer by the name of Kel'Thuzad in the town of Brill, where they then pursued him to Anderhall. Kel'Thuzad then announced to Arthas and Jaina that he was the one responsible for ordering the Cult of the Damned and distributing the plagued grain. He also announced, however, that he did serve a dreadlord named Mal'Ganis, who would command the Scourge in cleansing the lands of Lordaeron from the living. Arthas, who was then infuriated by the necromancer's deeds, executed Kel'Thuzad, and he, together with Jaina, dispatched to Stratholme in hopes of encountering this dreadlord. Along the way, they decided to stop at Hearthglen village to rest, but instead were warned of an approaching army of undead. Arthas immediately ordered Jaina to find Uther and request for reinforcements while he remained behind to defend the town. Arthas and his forces were on the verge of defeat until Uther arrived with reinforcements and aided the young prince in saving the village. While on the way to Stratholme, however, Arthas was then met by a prophet known as Medivh. The prophet strongly advised that the young prince travel to Kalimdor, to which Arthas argued that his place was amongst his people, and that the last thing that he would do is abandon them. Jaina questioned Arthas and suggested that Medivh may have been right, but Arthas, so consumed with saving his homeland, paid her no heed and continued to Stratholme. When he arrived, Arthas saw that the grain had already been distributed and realized that the city must be cold, or else all of the citizens residing within the city would soon turn into mindless abominations. Horrified by the young prince's idea of purging the city, Uther, Jaina, and a number of their alliance soldiers left the prince in his mission to slaughter the corrupted townsfolk. Eventually, as he was purging the city, Arthas was met by the Nathrezim, Mal'Ganis, and as the young prince demanded that they end the conflict right then and there, Mal'Ganis fled the confrontation and told the young prince to find him in Northrend. Arthas, enraged that he could not complete his mission that day, set fire to Stratholme, and it is stated that those fires still burn to this very day. A month later, Arthas and his troops arrived in Daggercap Bay, and as they searched for a suitable place to set camp, Arthas' men came under gunfire until they were soon recognized by the Dwarven Explorers Guild. And who recognized them? It was Arthas' good friend and former mentor, Muradin Bronzebeard. Together they set out together in search for Frostmourne until an emissary from Lordaeron announced that he bore orders from King Terenas and Uther the Lightbringer that instructed Arthas to recall his troops back home. However, the young prince had no intention of leaving before exacting his revenge on Mal'Ganis. Arthas then hired some mercenaries to burn his boats so that his troops were forced to pursue their original mission. When his men arrived, Arthas betrayed the mercenaries and accused them of destroying the ships by their own agenda. This action that Arthas had just instigated saddened and disgusted Muradin, but the dwarf decided that it was in everyone's best interest to not reveal the truth to the men. As they pursued their search for Frostmourne, Mal'Ganis once again appeared and foretold the prince's death. However, Arthas treated this as a bluff by the Demon Lord in an attempt to discourage Arthas and Muradin from reaching Frostmourne. As they continued their campaign, Arthas, along with Muradin and a small group of men, used an ancient gateway in order to travel to the vicinity of the fabled rune blade. Once inside, Arthas immediately felt a calling to the blade. Muradin, reading the inscription, noted that the blade was cursed and told Arthas to leave it be and return home from the way they came. Paying no attention to the dwarf's warnings, Arthas then took the blade, which shattered its ice barrier, and in doing so, incapacitating Muradin. With Frostmourne in hand, Arthas left Muradin for dead and returned back to his camp where he defeated all of Mal'Ganis' minions and finally confronted the Dreadlord. Mal'Ganis, pleased that Arthas had acquired Frostmourne, then asked a former paladin what exactly did the Dark Lord instruct him to do next. Arthas then replied that the Whispers told him to destroy Mal'Ganis, and after slaying the Dreadlord, Arthas fled into the frozen north where he forsook his men to their inevitable deaths. Marching aimlessly into the frozen north, with nothing else than the Whispers of Frostmourne. Months later, the Whispers of Frostmourne guided Arthas back to the throne of Lordaeron, where his father would be. The lands of Lordaeron shouted with joy at the miraculous return of their hero and heir to the throne. However, he was not the so-called hero that they recalled him to be. Arthas, accompanied by both Captain Falric and Captain Marwyn, personally murdered his own father, which broke the stability within Lordaeron. He then tasked both of the former Alliance captains, whom were murdered and raised into undeath, with the duty of slaying the citizens of the city and raising them into undeath as well with their newly gained powers. After leaving the city to rot, Arthas reassembled the Cult of the Damned, and through plotting with Tychondrius, another dreadlord the same as Mal'Ganis, he recovered the corpse of the necromancer Kel'Thuzad. Kel'Thuzad's remains were decomposed and needed to be taken to Quel'Thalas to be revived within the Sunwell. To do this, Arthas needed to recover an urn in order to contain the Lich's remains and transport them into the Elven City. While returning with the urn, Uther confronted Arthas and demanded that the urn be returned, because it held the ashes of his father. Arthas scoffed at the paladin and the two clashed blades. The confrontation ended with the death of the legendary paladin and the engulfment of an additional soul. After murdering his lifelong mentor, Arthas abandoned his father's remains and then began the long journey towards Quel'Thalas. Once he arrived, Arthas was greeted by heavy resistance led by the Ranger General Sylvanas Windrunner. Sylvanas vexed Arthas so greatly that instead of simply killing her and leaving it at that, he also reanimated her into a banshee to fight at his whim. Ultimately, the undead ran over the elves, which led them to be defenseless against the resurrection of the necromancer Kel'Thuzad. After the resurrection of Kel'Thuzad, he and Arthas both set out to summon the Burning Legion Eredar Lord Archimonde. The Eredar Lord instructed Kel'Thuzad to acquire the Book of Medivh located in Dalaran, which would allow Kel'Thuzad to summon him. Arthas and his undead legion eventually broke down the Kirin Tor's magical defenses, killed the Archmage Antonidas, and claimed the Book of Medivh. After summoning Archimonde to Azeroth, however, Archimonde stated that he had no further uses for the Lich King, and that the Dreadlord Tychondrius was now placed in command of the Scourge. Confused and enraged at this turn of events, Arthas then asked Kel'Thuzad what would become of them. The Lich responded by saying that this had already been foreseen by the Dark Lord. They both disappeared and left Archimonde to conduct a ritual to destroy the magical kingdom of Dalaran. Time has passed, and eventually the Eredar Lord Archimonde was defeated. Upon the Demon Lord's death, Arthas confronted the Dreadlords in an attempt to slay them all. The Nathrezim fled, and in time, Arthas received a painful seizure that could not be ignored. The Lich King called out to him, and it was revealed later that the Lich King's power was dwindling. Eventually, the Lich King's power weakened so much to the extent of where Sylvanas was no longer under his control, and when she was free, her rage was unending. Sylvanas ambushed Arthas in the woods and shot him with a stun arrow, but before she could deliver the finishing blow, the Lich Kel'Thuzad came to the Lich King's rescue and overpowered Sylvanas, causing her to flee into the woods. At this time, the Lich King's strength was dropping at an extensive rate, and as Arthas' power began to dwindle, he also began to hear the mental cries of Ner'zhul ordering that he return to Northrend, for Illidan and his forces were on their way to destroy the Frozen Throne. Immediately, Arthas set sail for Northrend and left Kel'Thuzad behind to command the Scourge that still resided within Lordaeron. 3 weeks later, upon arriving on the coast of Northrend, Arthas was immediately attacked by Blood Elves led by Kael'thas Sunstrider. Hungry for vengeance at their kingdom's destruction, the Blood Elves assaulted the Death Knight with all of their might, but ultimately failed when the giant Crypt Lord known as Anub'arak saved the former paladin. This Crypt Lord led Arthas through underground passageways within Azjol-Nerub in order to beat Illidan to the race to the Frozen Throne. When he came upon the doors of Azjol-Nerub, however, he was immediately attacked by both Nerubians who had survived the destruction of their kingdom, and also dwarves that had remained in Northrend after Muradin was incapacitated. After defeating these forces, however, Arthas and Anub'arak also faced against a powerful and vicious being thought only to exist in legend. Until now, they faced off against a servant of the old gods themselves. This being was known as the Forgotten One, and although it was extremely powerful, Arthas and the Crypt Lord were able to defeat the monstrosity. When they finally reached the surface, however, they were immediately assaulted by Vash's Naga and Kael'thas Blood Elves. But with the power of Anub'arak on his side, Arthas fought his way to the Frozen Throne. It was there that Illidan Stormrage was waiting for the young Death Knight. Though both of them were extremely versatile and skillful combatants, Arthas eventually emerged the victor and sliced open the Demon Hunter's chest with Frostmourne, while Illidan was attempting to assault the fallen prince from above. Leaving Stormrage to bleed out on the snow, Arthas turned back and told Illidan, "Leave Azeroth and never return." Arthas entered the Hollow Glacier, and as he continued his way atop the frozen throne, the voices of those he had forsook and betrayed flowed through his mind. The voices of Muradin, Uther, and Jaina called out to him, and yet he ignored them and paid no attention to their words. Upon reaching the pinnacle, he saw before him an icy cask, which inside contained a suit of armor and a malevolent helmet. As he came closer, the helmet whispered to him to return the blade and complete the circle. With all of his remaining might, the fallen Prince of Lordaeron brought down the might of Frostmourne against Ner'zhul's icy prison, and as the icy containment was shattered, Arthas placed the Helm of Damnation upon his head, and upon doing so, merged with the Elder Shaman into one single entity.